Every empire swears its money is safe. Every government insists its promises will last forever. And every single time, history proves them wrong. From Rome to France, from the Confederacy to modern Lebanon, people have woken up to find their savings worthless, their salaries meaningless, and their futures stolen by systems they thought were solid. Currency collapse isn't rare. Currency collapse is the rule. Financial collapse happens over and over again. The real question isn't whether money fails. It is how you protect yourself when it does. The illusion of permanence is the most dangerous financial mistake you can make. We look at our bank balances, our national currencies, and we assume they are bedrock. But money is not bedrock. Money is trust, and trust can vanish overnight. That is why history is so brutal and so useful. Every collapse leaves behind a trail of lessons, patterns, and warnings about what actually protects wealth and what evaporates into dust. Take the Byzantine Empire. At the heart of its economy was the gold solidus, a coin so reliable that merchants across Europe and Asia accepted it without question. For centuries, it was the global reserve currency. You would think they would have learned from Rome's earlier disaster with the silver denarius. But no. The Byzantines made the exact same mistake. They began shaving its purity, stretching it thinner, mixing in cheaper metals. At first, no one noticed. Then, trust cracked. The coin that had anchored the world became just another piece of political fiction. What survived the crash? Not the paper promises, not the government decrees. The merchants who had quietly hoarded real gold and land outside imperial reach preserved their wealth while everyone else saw their money evaporate. That is the first timeless lesson. Governments cannot resist the temptation to dilute their money. And when they do, real value flees to assets they cannot counterfeit. This is the history they don't teach you in school. And frankly, it is the history the algorithm tries to bury because it exposes the fragility of the system we live in today. We are racing to hit 1,000 subscribers to break the shadow ban barrier. If you want to ensure this kind of uncensored financial history reaches you before it's deleted, you need to signal the system. Subscribe now. Join the resistance. But not every collapse comes from rulers tinkering with coins. Sometimes, the shock strikes out of nowhere. In the mid-1300s, Europe was struck by the most devastating pandemic in human history, the Black Death. Between 1347 and 1351, as many as half of all Europeans died, cities emptied, trade routes broke down, and yet, the economic story of the plague is more complex than simple catastrophe. It was a massive wealth reset. When half the labor force disappeared, labor became precious. Survivors could suddenly demand higher wages. But here's the key. Food and land, which were once scarce, became abundant compared to people. Families with liquidity, with silver, goods, or portable wealth suddenly had leverage they never dreamed of. Land that once cost a fortune could be bought for a fraction. Houses stood abandoned, and the survivors were in a buyer's market. If that sounds uncomfortably familiar, it should. During the COVID pandemic, we saw a modern version of this exact dynamic. Supply chains were disrupted. Governments printed trillions to keep the machine from seizing up, and we saw a massive wave of inequality. Those with liquidity bought assets, stocks, real estate, crypto. While they were cheap, those living paycheck to paycheck fell further behind as inflation ate their wages. The rhyme is clear. Pandemics redistribute wealth. They always have. Survivors of the Black Death leveraged scarcity to climb the social ladder. Survivors of COVID leveraged central bank printing to scoop up property and businesses. The lesson is not comforting, but it is true. Crises reward those with reserves and punish those without them. While pandemics show us how fast shocks can flip an economy, the collapse of banking in Renaissance Florence shows us something just as vital. Institutions that look too big to fail can fall like dominoes. In the 1340s, Florence was the Wall Street of Europe. It was home to powerful banking families like the Bardi and the Peruzzi. These houses were massive. They had branches from London to Jerusalem. But they made a fatal mistake. They lent heavily to governments. Specifically, they lent to King Edward III of England to fund his wars with France. When the war went badly, King Edward simply refused to pay. He defaulted. The result was catastrophic. The banks collapsed instantly. Depositors were ruined. Trade froze. Florence, once the richest city in the world, was thrown into chaos. The ordinary citizen who had trusted the city's mighty banking dynasties discovered a brutal truth. Size was not safety. Reputation was not protection. What did people learn? That too big to fail is a lie as old as finance itself. Institutions exist to profit, not to guarantee your survival. When they fall, they take your savings with them. The lesson repeats in every century, from the Florentine crash to Lehman Brothers in 2008, to the banks of Lebanon in 2019. In Lebanon, people trusted the banks until the morning they woke up and found the doors locked. The ATMs were empty, the transfers were blocked. Survival belongs to those who recognize that an institution's promises are only good until the day they aren't. This is the information the financial system tries to suppress. The algorithm doesn't like it when we question the safety of the banks. We are fighting an uphill battle against the shadow ban to get this truth out. If you want to help us break through the censorship wall, subscribe right now. Send a signal that you want the truth, not the narrative. The American Civil War is remembered for battles and politics, but behind the gunpowder was a brutal financial war that most Americans today barely understand. Both the Union and the Confederacy discovered that war on that scale required printing money. In the North, they printed greenbacks. These were paper notes not backed by gold, but by the promise of the United States itself. As they flooded the economy, inflation eroded their value and trust wavered. But in the South, the problem was apocalyptic. The Confederacy, desperate for resources and cut off from global trade, printed graybacks in staggering quantities. By the end of the war, Confederate inflation hit nearly 9,000%. A soldier's paycheck was worthless before the ink was dry. Families carried bags of bills just to buy a single loaf of bread. By 1865, Confederate currency was not just weak, it was dead. What mattered in that collapse was not patriotic paper promises. It was hard assets. Land, food, gold, cotton, anything real held its value while money became a cruel joke. For ordinary Southerners who held their savings in paper, this was devastating. Lifelong fortunes vanished into dust. But for opportunists with access to tangible goods, the war was a chance to seize property at fire sale prices. It is a lesson Americans rarely hear, but should never forget. Your own country has already lived through currency collapse. And when it happened, protection came not from trusting the paper in your wallet, but from holding value the system could not inflate away. This is the history that makes the establishment nervous. It proves that even in America, paper money can go to zero. We are fighting the shadow ban to keep these historical warnings visible. If you believe this history needs to be remembered, strike the subscribe button. Help us break the suppression algorithm. France offers a brutal case study in how revolutions can destroy money faster than any war. In the 1790s, as revolutionaries toppled the monarchy, they issued a new paper currency, the Assignats. In theory, these were safe, backed by the value of confiscated church lands. But the government couldn't help itself. They printed them with abandon. Prices spiraled, wages failed to keep pace. Farmers refused to sell food for paper, demanding goods or silver instead. In Paris, the bread riots returned. The winners in this collapse weren't the ones holding patriotic paper. They were the ones who held food, gold, or property, things the government couldn't print. Fast forward 2 centuries, and the lesson reappears in Asia. In 1997, the Asian financial crisis exploded. Countries like Thailand had borrowed heavily in US dollars, confident their local currency would stay strong. But when the Thai baht collapsed, those debts became unpayable overnight. The people who suffered most were not the hedge funds. It was ordinary citizens whose savings evaporated and whose mortgages doubled in cost. The pattern was painfully familiar. Those who held local currency were wiped out. Those who held dollars or hard assets survived. What looked like a local collapse was actually a global wealth transfer. Wall Street institutions walked away with fire sale deals on Asian factories and real estate. The lesson echoes from France to Thailand. Debt in someone else's money is a death trap. This brings us to a critical choice. History shows that when the system breaks, you can only trust what you can hold. I want to know your strategy. If the system reset tomorrow, what is your bedrock? Go to the comments and type one word: gold, portable wealth, or land, productive wealth. The survivors in France chose land. The survivors in Asia chose gold. Make your choice. The most chilling part of history is that collapse isn't just ancient or distant. It is happening right now. In Lebanon, between 2019 and 2021, the banks did something that still feels unthinkable to most people in the developed world. They locked the doors. Citizens woke up to find their deposits frozen, withdrawals limited, and their currency collapsing. The Lebanese pound lost over 90% of its value in months. A lifetime of savings became pocket change. People lined up outside banks, begging for access to their own money to pay for food or medicine, only to be told it was gone. And it wasn't just small savers. Middle-class families, retirees, doctors, engineers, anyone who had trusted the system was wiped out. The lesson was brutal and legally precise. Your money in the bank is not a treasure chest. It is an unsecured loan you have made to an institution. And that institution can decide, in a crisis, not to pay you back. The people who survived best were those who had either diversified abroad, held real assets like gold or property, or kept cash outside the banking system. Everyone else was trapped. If this sounds far away, it shouldn't. In 2008, Americans watched their homes be repossessed. In 2023, regional banks in the United States collapsed almost overnight when depositors lost confidence. Survival belongs to those who realize that the safety of too big to fail is a fairy tale we tell ourselves until the day the door slams shut. This is the specific knowledge the establishment fears. If everyone realized their deposits were loans, the system would break. The algorithm tries to hide this truth. We are racing to 1,000 subscribers to break the shadow ban and keep this channel alive. Subscribe right now. Don't let them silence the warning. So, how do you protect yourself when everything falls apart? History shows there is no single magic bullet. In Byzantium, it was gold. After the Black Death, it was liquidity. In Florence, it was distrusting the banks. In the Civil War, it was hard goods. In France, it was property. In Lebanon, it was self-custody. The patterns change, but the theme is constant. Survival comes not from blind trust in paper or institutions, but from recognizing what holds real value when the illusions collapse. And here is a paradox that should wake you up. Collapse is both a tragedy and an opportunity. For the unprepared, it is ruin. But for those with resilience, liquidity, or assets that cannot be printed away, it is the moment to acquire wealth at a fraction of its cost. After the Black Death, peasants became landowners. After 2008, those with cash bought homes for pennies on the dollar. History shows us that protection is not just about defense. It is about positioning yourself to seize what others are forced to give up. But wealth isn't only about what you own, it is also about what you can do. The true survivors of history weren't just the hoarders, they were the producers. The baker who could provide bread, the craftsman who could repair tools, the farmer who could feed a community. In every crisis, money loses its meaning. But production never does. People still need to eat, build, and trade. Those who can meet those needs are never poor for long. That is the deeper protection, not blind faith in the Fed, not the hope that the government will save you. It is the combination of real assets, real skills, and zero trust in paper promises. Every crisis is a transfer of wealth, from the many who trusted to the few who prepared. This is the truth the algorithm tries to hide. They want you dependent, not prepared. They want you trusting the bank, not building your own foundation. We are racing to hit 1,000 subscribers to break the shadow ban barrier. We need 1,000 insiders to prove that there is an audience for the truth. If you want to be on the right side of the next wealth transfer, you need to join us. Subscribe now. Signal the system. Break the silence. Class dismissed.